My name is Jennifer Lawrence, and I'm the Executive Director of the Sasaki Foundation. We'd like to thank you for taking the time to be with us today to celebrate Earth Day. And we believe we're celebrating in a most important way by celebrating the young people who are most often leading the charge in protecting the planet where we live and upon which we depend. At the Sasaki Foundation, we believe design has the power to address the most urgent challenges facing us, from social equity to environmental resilience. Design is an agent of change, and yet access to design for the communities who need it the most is often limited. So we work at the intersection of research, practice, and community to leverage design to tackle these challenges. In addition to gathering impressive panels of local experts to discuss inequities and solutions like we are doing here today, we also currently have 2 open opportunities to engage in creating solutions through the foundation. So our design grants are open now, and they are for community groups and interdisciplinary teams to propose their solutions to some of our community's most pressing needs. The due date for applications is 12 p.m. on May 4th, and I'm putting the link in the chat right now. We also have applications available for our high school program, which is a summer paid internship called the Summer Exploratory Experience in Design, or SEED, where Boston area high school students receive paid internships and learn hands-on skills in various design disciplines. The due date for applications is just a week away on April 29th, and I'm putting that in the chat as well. So thank you again for attending today. We are honored you would take time out to join us in this important discussion in celebration of Earth Day. And I would also like to thank our board members of the Sasaki Foundation who are here. I saw we have Meredith, who is on our panel, and you'll hear from her a lot. I see Chris is here, and I believe that is everybody. And I apologize if I missed anybody. So now let me just put a few logistics for today out there. So first, captions are enabled. If anybody needs captions, and I'm just going to put this into the chat for you so that you can see how to enable captions. So to open them on your screen, please click on the icon at the bottom of your screen called Close Captions. Sometimes it's called Live Transcript, depending on what Zoom you have. It also has a symbol that says CC. If you do not see that setting, click on the 3 dots on the bottom right of your screen to locate it. And also, chat is enabled, and we'd love to take your question ideas. We've saved a little bit of time at the end for questions. We'll try to do that. So use the chat to log a question with me. At the end of the session, we will have time for just a handful of questions. I'll try to get to as many as we can. If you are having any technical issues, please direct chat with me, Jennifer Lawrence, and I will assist you. And then also try to stay muted throughout the session. And we'll have time during questions where you may be able to unmute and ask live. We hope you enjoy the conversation. We're so happy to have you here. And now it is my honor to introduce our moderator for today. Our moderator is Emily Paris, who is a senior associate and architectural designer at Sasaki, and has also worked with the Sasaki Foundation on various youth engagement and employment initiatives. She has experience in the planning and design of arenas, stadiums, gymnasiums, fitness centers, practice facilities, and athletic fields, and has been working in sports design and planning for over 10 years. She holds a Bachelor of Architecture from Roger Williams University. As a sports enthusiast and former collegiate athlete, Emily has worked on a variety of projects from NCAA Division I arenas to recreational fitness centers, and has a keen interest in the unique traditions and adjacencies that make each facility a successful part of the campus fabric. Thank you, Emily, for moderating this panel discussion and introducing us to such incredible organizations and the employees who make this work their priority.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you, everybody, for joining. I'm flattered to be moderating such an impressive group of individuals. So, you know, today is, as Meredith called it, Earth Day proper, which is pretty cool. So the theme of Earth Day for 2022 is to invest in our planet. And, you know, what a better way to really celebrate that than to organize this panel. And you're going to hear today from some experts in youth engagement and empowerment about some of the investments that must be made in order to ensure that our planet and our people are treated sustainably and equitably. It's a really exciting topic, and I really am excited to hear our take on it. Earthday.org actually states it really cleanly, and they said, we need to act boldly, innovate broadly, and implement equitably. It's going to take all of us, all in, businesses, governments, and citizens, everybody accounted for, and everyone accountable, a partnership for the planet. And I think, if we think about ourselves and our own path to where we are today, there's always a mentor, an advocate, a human, or a foundation that has helped us to kind of broaden our expectations and grow. So, this is something that really kind of talks to us as humans. And we hope that this discussion will give you some tools and insights as to how your firm or your agency or even just your household can take some actionable steps towards creating a more sustainable planet equitably by engaging young people in creating solutions. So today we've gathered some leaders from the Greater Boston nonprofit organizations, and they're going to speak to you all about the importance of youth engagement as a building, youth engagement in building sustainability, youth empowerment as a tool for equitable communities, and also how they've created their programs by giving youth agency and ensuring that the youth voice is centered. So I'm going to go through a few introductions of some of our panelists. And then after that, we're going to allow them to introduce their organizations from their point of view. And we will then jump into our kind of panel questions and our discussion, which we can all kind of learn and grow from. Okay, so first from Grassroots Incorporated, Ariana, Roxana, and Sarah. Ariana is 15 years old and goes to the Mystic Valley Regional Charter School in Malden. She's been a part of Green Roots ECHO program since August of 2020 and joined because her family has been involved since she was 10. And it really inspired her. She likes how Green Roots offers many opportunities for the youth and motivates the youth to become involved in future circumstances. Roxana is 17 years old and is a senior at Excel Academy Charter School in East Boston. She goes by pronouns she and her. She's been part of the ECHO crew since October of 2020 and joined because she wanted to work closely with community members to improve the environment of Chelsea and likes that ECHO focuses on youth outreach in order to educate them about environmental justice. Sarah is a youth worker, participatory action researcher, and a firm believer in the transformative power of relationships. Sarah began her popular education at community organizing journey over 8 years ago. She most recently managed the ZoomX Pathways program, providing wraparound academic, emotional, and professional support to ZoomX teens. She recently completed her master's in urban and environmental policy and planning at Tufts University. Okay, so from Groundwork Somerville, we have Jennifer and Tati. Tati is a recent Tufts graduate, originally from Brooklyn. She's always been passionate about working with youth and working against racism, sexism, and homophobia. While at Tufts, Tati designed her own major, combining aspects of child development, Africana studies, and psychology. As a sophomore, Tati joined Groundwork as a Tisch Scholar intern and worked as a Green Team leader. Tati has worked in many roles at Groundwork, leading to her current role as Youth Development Manager. Tati is joined today by Jen. Jen is a senior at Somerville High, and she's been part of the Green Team for a year. She loves being a member because it makes her feel happy and joyful. She loves Green Team because they address issues within the community, such as food insecurity and environmental injustice. A main reason why she loves Green Team is working with the people that are there. It feels like home. And then from NOAA, we have Ashley, Clady, and Melinda. Melinda oversees the ENYO program, otherwise known as the NOAA Youth Organizers, whose mission is to empower and build strong relationships within the community, educate, and create public awareness on issues impacting East Boston. They do work to transform open green spaces like Chelsea Creek, fight against environmental racism, create change, and achieve environmental and social justice. She's joined today by two youth organizers, Ashley and Clady, who will be representing the youth and talking about their experiences being ENYO group members. And finally, from Sasaki and the Sasaki Foundation, we're joined by Meredith McCarthy.
Oh, you went to get me. Oh, I'm sorry. They gave me exit.
From Sasaki and the Sasaki Foundation, we're joined by Meredith McCarthy and Shamar Stewart. Meredith is a senior associate architect at Sasaki with over 10 years of experience. She enjoys the problem-solving challenges that design presents and thrives in a collaborative and creative environment as a storyteller at heart. She works closely with the Sasaki Foundation to spearhead their youth programming and in an effort to foster a more diverse and inclusive generation of future designers. Shamar is a senior at the University of Massachusetts in Amherst, majoring in architecture. He has been connected with the Sasaki Foundation since 2018, when he was one of the original 2 student interns in the SEED program. This internship played a major role in him switching careers from computer science to architecture, and then he later returned as a SEED teaching assistant and has stayed with us for 3 summers to guide students through their own SEED internships. I want to switch now to our panelists, and we'll hear them kind of describe themselves and their group as they introduce their organizations to us. Let's start with Green Roots.
And before Green Rose gets going, I just want to remind folks to try to keep muted. And if somebody accidentally unmutes, I'll try to catch it and mute it.
Green Roots.
Thank you so much. Thanks for those introductions, Emily. I'm actually going to pass it to Ariana to kick us off to introduce ECO. And if you can go on to the next slide, we can get started.
Thank you. So what is ECO? ECO is Environmental Chelsea Organizers, and we're a youth group at Green Roots. We're made up of 7 youth living in the cities of Chelsea and East Boston, and every day we advocate and shine light upon youth rights, youth empowerment, as well as bringing awareness to environmental injustices our city is facing. Over the past year, ECO has been working on a sea heat study, which is we have been monitoring heat surfaces and urban island heat. We've been working at Anita's Garden. We have painted a mural in Chelsea. We've done a donation drive, and most recently we have done a teen survey, which has helped see what other teens are experiencing in Chelsea. The HNS study, which is the Healthy Neighborhood Study. And we have been surveying different communities with demographic differences that have been affected by housing and finances. We have collaborated with other youth groups, and we have done social media campaigning.
So what is ECO's motivation? Not a lot of youth get the opportunity to share their voices to higher ups. We all come from different communities that are often overlooked, and a lot of the problems that we're currently facing will impact the youth of our future the most. So when we got the opportunity to be able to make change in our communities, we took it. These are some pictures of some activities we've been involved in. So here we're harvesting at the garden. We were part of a youth rally. We're also here. We are hosting our movie drive on the dock in Chelsea, harvesting at our garden at Anita's, and we were at a movement ground farms here.
Yeah, and so thanks Ariana and Roxana. I'll just add that Green Roots is an environmental and social justice organization working to achieve environmental justice and improve quality of life through collective action, unity, education, and youth leadership across Chelsea and East Boston. And so this is like a little ECO infographic that kind of illustrates our work. We work in many different areas that kind of fall under the environmental justice umbrella. So there's youth empowerment, clean air and public health, climate justice, transit justice, access to the waterfront, equitable access to the waterfront, land and food justice, and energy democracy. And ECO is, we're a self-directed group. We work on a lot of things that are related to this, and a lot of things that are related to, like youth power and education justice. And so we plug into Green Roots' campaigns in different ways and run some of our own as well. So I just wanted to add that, but it's nice to see you all. Thank you all for joining us. Oh, I'm so sorry. Anna, you can skip that. We wanted to make sure we were keeping it brief, so we can skip the rest of these slides. Thank you so much.
Hi again, I'm Tatiana Ver from Gunner Somerville. I'm here with Jen. Unfortunately, she has a little bit of tech issues, which is why you can't see her at the moment. Also, I tend to talk very fast when I'm doing presentations, so please tell me to stop if that happens. But we can go to the next slide. So just quickly about Gunner Somerville, we are a countrywide organization. And as you guys can see here, our mission and our vision, generally, we strive to cultivate the next generation of environmental leaders in order to grow a greener and more equitable Somerville. And we can go to the next slide, please. So this is a more recent picture of the farm and more detailed information about our mission and vision, just to give you guys more background about what we mean there, but we can go to the next slide, please. So we also use a multi-pronged approach with groundwork. We focus on youth development, which is our green team program and our school gardens program. We also do food and farms. So we have Emily, who's our farm manager, and all of the produce that we grow from the farm during the summer months go to either local organizations, community fridges, or our mobile farmers market. And we also practice racial and health equity, as well as sustainable environmental practices. And we do those through programs such as partnerships with the Mystic River Waterfront, cleaning and greening of Somerville area, Somerville or General Boston, as well as our World Crops Produce Program and other side programs that we'll have throughout the year, depending on what's happening in Somerville and what our youth are interested in at the time. We can go to the next slide, please. So a little bit more about our Green Team Youth Program. We launched in 2007 and we employ ages 14 to 18. Typically during the summer, that's when we have our biggest team, about 10 to 20 members, but we're currently doing our spring program, which is about 6 members at the moment, which I will say we cater our program as much as possible to the youth that we have joining us that season. So while youth are always exposed to farm work and are always able to get their hands dirty and work with nature, the conversations we have and the other filler projects that we do during those times definitely heavily depend on what the youth are interested in and what they want to learn that season. We do our best to hire a demographic of youth that represents the demographic of Somerville. So majority of our youth will be youth of color, they will be immigrants, and they will be low income. And we prioritize those youth to make sure that they have access to programs we may not otherwise have access to in Somerville. And as I mentioned, while we do our best to make sure everyone is getting dirty, getting like their hands in the dirt all the time while they're on South Street Farm, we do have those harder conversations about social justice, professionalism, team building, STEAM, community engagement. Really, it is whatever the youth are interested in, but we want to make sure they're getting as well-rounded of an education as possible as it is tied to environmental justice. And we can go to the next slide, please. So some projects that Green Team typically works on can fall into the categories of urban agriculture, sustainable environment, and civic engagement. And these are a few pictures of Green Team doing activities in all those areas. But one thing that the Green Team typically does every season, every year is bike to a lot of our work sites. And we do this as a method of showing youth that they don't always have to rely on cars or more like costly transportation methods, but also it's a team building bonding experience for the youth. A lot of them have biked before, but not everyone has. And it's a great way for them to bond and get to gel as a new team while being green and helping their city. And as far as civic engagement, we do our best to make sure that all the education that the Green Team receives themselves is done so in an accessible format so that they can share it with their community as well. And it's not an echo chamber of information just for us. We can go to the next slide, please. And just a little bit more about South Street Farm. It's a quarter-acre farm designed and built by the Green Team at the time. As I mentioned, our food goes directly to the mobile market every growing season during the summer, and we grow about 2,000 pounds of food per season. And the Green Team is the main workforce behind this space. So the food that's being planted in the ground, that's being harvested, that's being transported, that's being actually sold at the market, all of those stages are primarily run by Green Team members, which I think is pretty cool. And we can go to the next slide, please. And this is just a more recent picture of the farm. These are all pictures from last year. We were able to get, oh, there's a picture of Jen next to the bike shed. The top middle picture is a picture of Jen next to the bike shed. And we also have pictures of our youth harvesting produce. The middle picture of salsa is a picture that we made that the day that I believe Ed Markey came to visit the farm, and that's all produce that was growing on the farm at the time, which I think is really cool. And we also got beets last year as well. So we're hoping to go more into that direction as well of conservation with animals. And we can go to the next slide. As I mentioned, all of our produce goes to the Somerville Mobile Farmers Market. So the market also does order some other produce from local Massachusetts farms. But this is also one of the positions that I've had the privilege of holding since during my time at Groundwork. And the majority of the produce that we sell is produce from the farm, and we sell it at subsidized cost to all Somervillians. This started last year as a result of COVID. It was a 50% match program that was originally only for either residents of the housing facilities that we would go to, or older shoppers. Like, we had criteria that they'd have to meet, but now everyone is able to get that 50% subsidized match program, which is amazing. So now everyone has cheap access to produce that's growing right here in Somerville.
And Tati, we just have a couple seconds more left.
Yes, this, I think there should just be one more slide. Never mind, that was the last slide.
Perfect timing.
And is there one more slide for the Sasaki group?
I think that we still have Noah to go and then Sasaki.
Oh, no.
So we've got to go back to Noah.
Yeah.
And then are you all ready to? Yeah, so it's your turn now.
Everyone, my name is Melinda Vega Maldonado. I'm a Building and Environment Coordinator here at NOAA. I have the privilege and honor to oversee our youth group, ENYO, the NOAA Youth Organizers. Our mission here is to empower and build strong relationships with our community, educate and create public awareness on issues impacting East Boston, such as transforming green spaces like our Chelsea Creek, fighting against environmental racism, creating positive change in our community, and ultimately achieving environmental and social justice and empowering our young people and ensuring that they are part of the day-to-day decision-making processes that impact their day-to-day lives. This photo here is a photo of one of our events that our youth host. Lady will talk about it in more depth.
Yep. So these were actually taking, hi everyone, my name is Clayton. I've been a senior youth organizer with NOAA for about 2.5 years now. And these pictures were actually taken at one of our, what we call Woke Wednesday events. This specific one was focused on women empowerment because it happened on 31st, which was Women's History Month. And basically, our Woke Wednesdays just focus on kind of the intersections between race issues and socioeconomic issues, along with kind of environmental burdens and kind of raising awareness on climate change. I don't know. But yeah, we kind of just try to bring our community together. We're located in East Boston, but we really welcome anyone.
So hi everyone, my name is Carolina. I've been working with NOAA for about almost 4 years now. Although like NOAA has many campaigns, one of the campaigns that we focus a lot, especially in the summer, is our tree canopy campaign. We kind of have a system in place where we take our bikes out and we try to water as many trees in our community, specifically our city trees. We kind of have a lot of hot spots, like island hot spots. And this is one of the campaigns where we were trying to figure out like what exactly we should focus on in the community, what should we add on to the many campaigns that we have. And this is one where we had to do a lot of city work and get the community involved to help us with certain things. So currently we don't have that many city trees. We only have 15% of what we should have. And by every city tree, we get a resident to be like, hey, do you want to put in a tree in front of the house? Like we have an empty pit, have that, resident take care of that tree so it brings less maintenance to us and other trees that we can focus on. And we also like to partner with other organizations like Tree EC that also put more city trees in, bring in younger youth and teach them how to maintain these trees and learn more gardening work.
Okay, so I think we can move to the next slide, and I think it's Sasaki now. All right.
Hi, everyone. My name is Meredith McCarthy. My pronouns are she, her. I'm an architect at Sasaki, and I'm also a board member on the Sasaki Foundation. And I think Shamar will give you a really great idea of what the SEED program is. He's kind of our shining star of the SEED program. But to give you a little bit of background, we've been trying to develop a youth programming initiative for about 7 or 8 years, thinking about ways to engage with people well before they have to make a decision, of what they're going to do after high school, and finding ways to introduce younger people to the design industry to help it, become a little bit more diverse and a little more broad-reaching and represent more demographics than it does right now. So from that kind of idea came the SEED program, which is a 6-week summer internship for high school students. That's a bit of a crash course in design, and we try and give as much exposure to all the different parts of the built design world as we can. And Shamar was one of our first students and has come back year after year to help us continue to grow the program. So I'll hand it off to him to give a little bit of his experience on that.
Thank you, Meredith. Hi again, I'm Shamar Stewart. I was originally, as Meredith has said, one of the 2 students who was sort of with the SEED program that the firm was hosting in the earlier phases. I returned again next year as a teacher assistant for the next 3 summers and sort of guided the students through the process, design projects that the mentors, sort of the employees of the firms had sort of given to them. It was as much as my project as it was the students, since I was still in that learning phase, as many of us are. And we also worked as a team in sort of separate teams to produce projects that everyone really felt proud of. I would definitely say Sasaki was originally something that I really took back during 2018. I kind of took as a whim, because honestly, what they were trying to do is trying to get people into design. Because for me, I personally always had pet projects and different things that I personally felt passionate about, but was never really easily able to translate to design. And so it was through this that once I got that sort of, I guess, confidence, was that I could have kept on going with it. And I guess next slide, Anna. And so personally for me, we could probably keep going through these, because this was me back at Boston Latin School, and like the various different passion projects that I had, that essentially I was able to sort of keep going and trying to do a sort of creative process with. And then I suddenly ended up at Sasaki. It was very much a happenstance of me looking, like really just getting out of high school and seeing what do I really do, because then college was, of course, was the next situation. But I never really felt confident in what I did. And so next slide. It sort of really came down to the place that they were in and like the sort of atmosphere that they had. It was a place that we usually were in was the incubator, and the various different disciplinary people who were there actually really promoted like a very community that I felt like I want to be here. And next slide. And sort of one of the things which we had last year was the similar to the NOAA group, was a sort of cool spot because of at least every project has sort of a relevant theme. And this one was particularly with the urban heat island effect. And we were trying to see like how do these students in their sort of local expertise of the place that they live in, how can they sort of generate different ideas for what they want. as opposed to just simply like outsiders doing it. Next slide. And so this is, well, an expansion of it. And so next slide. And then sort of over the course of the 3 years, we were fortunately able to keep maintaining it through the pandemic and sort of seeing a different diversity of different people and hopefully expanding it more and more as it sort of continues to grow. Yeah. And this is me with that. And these are just different projects which I feel like I've benefited from, at least being with Sasaki. Yeah.
That's great. Okay, thank you everybody for those awesome kind of introductions to yourselves, and also, you know, what your organizations are really spearheading. It's really exciting work that you're all doing. Let's dive a little bit deeper. I have a few questions here. The first one, actually, I'd like to have every organization answer, so we'll do in the same order. But the first question I think should be, how do each of your organizations engage young people in your programming? And then as part of that, how does this partnership between the youth and adults work in your organization, in your institution? Let's start with Green Roots.
Sure. Yeah. So I guess I'll start with ECO is the main way we engage young folks in our programming. And that means that we are creating structured and paid opportunities for youth. So I'm sure the same, yeah, these are youth employment, folks are representing their youth employment programs. So it's really important that these opportunities are paid. I think a lot of how our programming has worked in the past has been through word of mouth in terms of recruitment. So folks who were part of ECO in the past would recruit friends to come on in the future. It is a year-round program, so we work about 12 to 15 hours during the school year and 20 hours during the summer. In terms of broader engagement of other young folks, we have a couple of different ways we're doing that right now. As Ariana mentioned, we designed a teen survey to survey young folks in Chelsea and East Boston on what social justice issues are important to them and how we can incorporate that into our planning in the future. We are planning several community-focused events for like younger ones and teens. So during April Vacation Week, ECO planned a series of events at our community garden where we did, we planted lettuce. We had a plan to plant potatoes, but our potatoes hadn't arrived yet. We did some STEM exercises related to potatoes. So a lot of the work that we're doing and engaging young folks is around community-centered events.
That's great. That's
yeah,
excellent.
and I guess, yeah, I'll leave it there so other folks can respond.
Sure. How about Groundwork Somerville, Tati and Jen?
Yeah, I would say, I don't want to go too much of what Sarah just said, but similarly, I would highlight our Green Team and our School Gardens program. Green Team, as I mentioned, is for high school age youth, and it's paid during, I'm working on getting it paid year round, but it's always paid during the summer and during the school year. It's for school credit. But I would also mention our School Gardens program, just because even though it is with elementary age youth, typically that's where I've seen most interest be piqued in youth. Just like we come in and we do a lesson with them and they get to experience their school garden in a whole different way. And then we're able to hire them once they enter into high school and to like do this as an actual job after school, and they can actually get more into it in that way. Jen can tell you how many times a day I'll text, sorry, not board Jen, or my,
yeah, hi.
She can tell you how many times a day I touched something, I'm sorry. Is everyone?
No, you're good. You're spotlit now.
Yeah, you're
good. But yeah, I often ask her for feedback on how I'm structuring the program or structuring curriculum, because even though there are educational, I'll say like markers that we do want to hit in our curriculum. As I mentioned before, do want it to be curriculum that the youth is interested in and that they actually want to do. And even in our interview process, in our application process, like that is the question, those are the questions that I'm asking, like, what are they interested in learning? What do they want to talk about on Green Team, so that it informs how I structure curriculum, and not necessarily me just trying to like edge their interest into curriculum that I've already created, if that makes sense. And I think that I don't want to jump into another question that we have coming on down the road, but I do think that's essential into how Groundwork runs our programming in terms of just like making sure we're cycling like youth through all of our opportunities and making sure that like we're always highlighting like the youngest and most like apt person for the job, if that makes sense. Like I think I benefited from that as well, since I joined as a not a high school or a university or but still a youth and still an internship and now like have progressed into a full-time role. So I definitely see that, but yeah, we're gonna get into that a little bit later.
Yeah, it helps keep you current. No, that's really exciting. It's interesting stuff. How about the NOAA team? How are you guys engaging youth people and the partnership between youth and adults? How does that work for you?
So I want to echo what some of my peers already stated. It's super important to make sure that we're paying our young people for their time, acknowledging that in EC, being that it's an environmental justice, low-income community of color, we want to make sure that we're creating opportunities and paying our young people for their time. Some of our young people, this is a job that they support also their families. So we need to acknowledge that that's real. Aside from that, it's also meeting young people where they're at, building long, strong relationships with schools and teachers, so that we can make sure that we identify throughout identifying leaders and plugging them into programs early on, so that, we can mold leaders and create organizers, community organizers and leaders in the world, and make sure that they're civically engaged and that they are part of the decision-making process and that impact their lives, and that they're meaningfully engaged, not only there as like a token, but that they're leading the conversation, they're deciding what are the campaigns they want to work on, and also when if the adults don't have space for our young people to be at the table, we're creating those spaces. We got to be real. And I think that's most important, especially with issues like climate change, where in the environment, where these are topics that truly are going to impact them, and this whole notion of like the youth are our future. I'm like, no, they're the now and the future. That's why we need to make sure we're getting them involved and engaged now. And so when it comes to working with adults, it's, highlighting the importance of that and making sure that we're building, strong intergenerational relationships, and, whether that is like hosting fun events together, doing door knocking initiatives together, and things like that. I think that's sort of kind of what we do here.
Yeah, that's really well put, right? Like this is their time. It's not their future, and they inherit from us. That's a really interesting way to perceive that, for sure. All right, Meredith and Shamar, how about the Sasaki Foundation?
Yeah, so I think the Sasaki Foundation really offers a variety of programming for different ages and different time commitments. We have programs that are a one-time 2-hour-long introduction to design. We have a one-day introduction to design. We have 1-week boot camps, and then we have 6-week-long kind of immersive experience in the summer. And we also do mentorship opportunities throughout the school year. So we look for different areas that we can really be impactful in different ways, understanding that students' attention spans differ based on how old they are, how much they're able to absorb on a topic at a single time. So we really try and create a diverse offering that people can kind of pick and choose what might work best for them. We also, I think someone said it, we try and meet the students where they are, and that focuses a lot on understanding knowledge bases. We try and set aside the fact that we are experts with many years of experience in the design field, and we get down to the things that maybe made us excited to join them in the beginning, right? And being curious and having opportunities to creatively problem solve. Those are things that you really don't need experience in the design field to be good at and to be excited about. So we try and bring those aspects of the industry to the forefront so that the students can see, what kinds of opportunities are there for them. We also really focus on making things fun and interactive. It's not a lot of us talking at people. We want to engage and get people doing things on their own. And we find that the best way to do something is just to try it. Design is very much that kind of thing. So we try and make as much interaction as possible. And lastly, kind of creating supportive environments and understanding that this is an introduction for a lot of students, and there's not a lot of experience on their end, but there's a lot of brain power there, and there's a lot of passion there, and kind of showing them that it's okay to fail, and failing is actually a really good thing as you're starting to learn. So we find that's probably the most important piece, is to just create safe, supportive environments. And I think, Shamar, maybe you can give the other side of that, of what it was like to come up through some of the programming.
Yeah, I would say one of the things that I really felt like I kind of experienced throughout the different summers was that the sort of general level of investment kind of always shifted and swelled between what the students were actually doing, because there was always a separation between, like, is this just simply schoolwork, or is this something that is actually mine to control and what I can actually do with my time? It was, I know definitely during the summer of 2020, it was a very slow crawl until we got to a point of like the sort of design process where the students were, we just simply asked them, what do you want in this place? And it was sometimes where if that wasn't actually present, it sometimes became much more of a chore, much more busy work that the students felt, until they actually got something where I believe one of the students named Najeli, who really liked sports and like particularly like squash court, once that was actually incorporated, the amount of like activity that they wanted to do kind of spiked, quite literally. And it was something that, how do you get a sort of connection of general investment towards the students, because then it becomes theirs as opposed to them, a bunch of grown-ups telling them, oh, this is what you do. It's rather than giving them the question of what do you want to do, and hopefully it finagling it in a way that makes it so it was always the students to begin with.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. I think, there's some kind of similar highlights through each of the responses, and some things that feel really very much unique to some of the content that people are including. I think one thing that I'm thinking about is everybody has such a positive perception on this idea of youth engagement and youth employment. But there's got to be some struggles, right? So let's jump into some of the reality of this and some of the fundamentals of how we make it work. So let's start, Sarah. How about, can you talk a little bit about some of the struggles in running a youth employment program, because it varies from kind of typical employment?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so funny. I was looking at all of these questions that you all came up with and was like, I want to know what ECO has to say about this, and what the young folks in our programs think of the answers to these as well. But I think a couple things I'll touch on quickly. One tension that I struggle with quite a bit is like this tension between prioritizing ECOs and in other youth programs that I've been a part of, like prioritizing the young folks learning and needing and feeling pressure maybe from funders and foundations to have specific outputs, and really, or even like things that they contribute, that these young folks contribute to the organization as a whole. And so, my perspective is that youth employment is also a youth program, and the main purpose of having young people be involved in youth employment programs is their learning and is their personal and professional growth. And a lot of times that does come from, being involved in organizations and contributing to organizational outputs, or having hitting specific quantitative metrics. But sometimes it doesn't look the way that other people want it to look, and that needs to also be okay. So that's one tension, one struggle that I've come up against in a lot of different organizations where I've worked. And then I'll also just add that young folks are doing a lot and holding a lot, and as a youth worker, I want to hold our young folks to the highest standard possible, and I also want to make sure that I'm caring for them with compassion and meeting their or helping them meet their mental health needs, or making sure that I'm being flexible when any number of things happen outside of the workplace. So those are some things that make it that complicate, I think, running youth programs.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're teaching the next generation of leaders, right? So that compassion and that kind of role modeling that you're doing is really important to how they perceive their future, right? In a lot of ways, it's an interesting conversation to have. Let's actually hear from some of our future leaders and get their voices in here. So let's talk. I'm talking to the Ariana, Roxana, Jen, Carolina, Clady, whoever feels interested in answering this. But I want to know, what aspects of your job really make you want to come back? And similarly, what aspects make you think maybe this isn't the right fit or the right job for me right now? So a little bit about kind of what you love and what maybe you would reconsider or have had experiences with in that regard. Anybody interested in jumping in?
I guess, well, my name wasn't called, but like.
No, sure.
Alrighty, because it was honest. I guess this kind of fits into like two of the questions later on, but it was always a question for me. It was always the retention of I guess the youth, which I would hopefully include myself in. It was that over the course of it really started back when I was going from intern to TA, was that it was the kind of that confidence of needing to know what I'm doing and needing to like have that opportunity to keep trying something over and over again, like with sort of different things. Because definitely one thing that I would say is, at least with Sasaki, that Sasaki has been doing very well, is sort of like the different disciplines of IT, strategies, graphics, and urban agriculture and fabrication studios. Because one of the things that I think has always been a challenge is not knowing what you want to do and what you like to do, because sometimes there is going to be that struggle of you don't really want to do this, but you kind of have to, and trying to like get every bit and piece of something that you can actually enjoy and actually be proud of over time. Because something that I can feel honest with, like many of the students that we've had over the summer, not many of them want to be an architect, not many of them want to be a landscape architect, not many of them want to be a planner, but there's always these different niches that they want, like particularly with one of the students from summer 2020 who was really into graphics. When we had the graphics 101, which is actually, I feel, a benefit that we could probably keep going with, or probably can even be expanded, is all these little 101s that give them little 1 hour, 2 hour snippets of like something that is actually connected or at least adjacent to architecture or to landscape architecture. And sort of they kept on going with it, and even to the point of, I believe they're still even continuing with that project because of this simple one moment thing.
Yeah, that's great. That's important, right? The one-on-one mentorship and that kind of connection as a human versus a level of staff. Anybody else? Ariana, Roxana, Jen, Carolina, Clady, anybody else? Same question. Or not? Okay, that's okay. I think one of the things that's interesting is for a lot of these folks, this is their first kind of intro to employment, and at the same time, it's a teaching opportunity. So Sarah, as you mentioned, the idea of being able to balance learning and achieving is something that can sometimes be a challenge for any job, for anybody. So it's interesting to talk about. Let's jump into another question. Tati, let's talk about Groundwork Somerville a little bit and kind of that introduction, right? How do you in particular introduce new students to your program? So, bringing somebody in that's new, we think about this at Sasaki a lot, someone new coming into a group of people who are already established. How is that kind of introduction or that kind of not initiation, that sounds terrible, but you know what I mean. How do you do this? And what's the kind of things that you've learned from experiences in the past of joining groups?
Yeah, great question. Thank you. I would definitely say at the very least, but definitely groundwork. I think we treat every team like a new team. So like, yes, we'll have returners and we'll have familiar faces, and we'll have youth that have done groundwork for 3 seasons come back and do it for a 4th, stuff like that. But I think we still like start everyone at the baseline of like, okay, what do you know? What do you need to know? What do you want to know? Like, even if those are questions that we asked the season before, like they may have changed for the youth that are coming back still. So like those are still questions that we ask everyone. And maybe they forgot, maybe they haven't, like maybe they want the reminder for whatever it is. But I do think we do I do my best at least to treat every team like a new team and not assume that anyone has any knowledge or access to anything that they may have had before, or that like some other people on the team have had, because that like you just don't know until you ask. So I do my best to just ask and not assume anything there. And I think in addition with that, I also do my best to like get a good sense and acknowledge and honor everyone who's in the room and who like all those identities, all those needs, like whatever those are, and figure out how best and how comfortably those are celebrated, and like whatever that means to anyone in that room. Like, yeah, I feel like it just to be able to acknowledge who's there and to like do so intentionally is so big, especially for youth of color, youth, immigrant youth, low income youth, just to know that you're seen, recognized, heard, and like all of those things are important to the people that are acknowledging you, especially for youth, is I think what I prioritize the most. And also to any degree like that I can, just making sure everyone has access to all of the same amount type like level of materials that they may need for groundwork, or just like outside of it, like anything, whether it be resume help, cover letter help, like applying for colleges. Like if you need a resource and we have access to it, or if you like, even if that's something that you may be able to pay for, like you may be able to get through school somewhere else, like I do think anything that I'm able to offer to one student, I make sure I can offer to all of them, just to make sure that that camaraderie is still there. No one like feels like they're pitted against each other in that way.
Yeah, that's great. That's a, in terms of team building, things that maybe we don't see or think about all the time, but that really kind of set a strong base for people to feel included and valued. And that's really a lot of what helps with retention and success of individuals. That's really interesting and awesome for you to spearhead that with you guys. In terms of these ideas that we have, I think for anyone on the line who maybe their organization doesn't offer youth programming, but is inspired by you all, as I have been already. I want to ask a question about advice for getting started. So let's start with Melinda and the NOAA group. What advice would you have for any organization or individual thinking about getting started in this type of a youth program?
I think making sure that you hire someone that is a nurturer, but also has and knows how to work with young people, right? First and foremost, and that you're doing it for not like self-interest of the organization, but for the betterment of the community overall. And for our young people, of course, and that they're benefiting just as much as, and anyone else is benefiting from it, the community and the organization. And I would say, in terms of advice, one of the things that I mentioned was meeting young people where they're at. It's really exploring, when you say you want to start having a youth crew, like what does that really mean, and what are the fundamentals and the foundations that you guys are going to focus on, first and foremost, and then make sure that you explore those with young people, making sure that they are part of the process from the very beginning. I think that's essential. And for it not to be grant driven, and more driven geared to the needs of, urgencies of the community. As an organizer, that's what I would say. I'm a community organizer, and that's what we do. And so for me, that's essential, making sure that that it's we're listening to our young people, and they're part of the decision-making process, as well as making sure that that the equity is in the center of it all, and also that community members are part of the process as well. And everyone has like stake in the game.
Yeah, to get everybody invested is going to help with the success of the conversation. Absolutely. I want to step back. Sorry, the question that I had asked Tati, I think Jen wanted to also give her perspective on how people are included from a new person into an existing team. Did you, Jen? Do you have? Oh, there you are. Okay.
I think she was gonna to do the one right before that. What makes you want to come back to a job?
I'm so sorry, Jen.
Okay, this is the Zoom chat world we're in.
Apologies, I got so into what people were saying, the chat just went rogue, and that's on me. So Jen, I would love to hear from you. And let us know what you're thinking. Are you there? There you are.
Yeah. Can you guys hear me? I'm sorry, my connection is like okay.
No, you're good.
Yeah. So going back to the question, what would the question was
what do you love about the job, and what would make you maybe not love a job as much?
Yeah. What I'm looking for a job, right? First of all, I look at the environment, how the bosses treat you, how the work environment is, right? Because a lot of jobs that I have seen, like let's say Target, Walgreens, I've seen a lot of people gossiping. The supervisors are like treating their workers like terrible, and that's a red flag. And if I see red flags, I'm just like, okay, I don't think I want to work here. How's the pay? Like stuff like that. And just because if I want to build like a relationship with my boss and my coworkers, right? And if I can't have some sort of like personal relationship or connection to them, it's like, I don't want to like come to work, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? Yeah. So that's what I look at first, just environment, and just seeing if like how they treat you is like good or bad. And that's the basics. I'd say.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think that is such a that never goes away, right? Who are you spending your time with, and what do you guys focus on while you're there? That's a quality of life moment, right? So I think when we come into a workplace, even if we're getting paid to work there, it is still about our human and what drives us. And so that's an incredibly like thoughtful response into where you're spending your time and how you feel when you come and go from that space. I'm going to switch a little bit to kind of maybe more of a Sasaki Foundation question for Meredith and Shamar, but one of the missions of the Sasaki design world is to kind of really incorporate interdisciplinary design, and how does the foundation and kind of the youth involvement initiatives take that and kind of develop it in a different kind of context? You guys want to talk to that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, I think the SEED program in particular is the most kind of expansive program that we have to give students an introduction to design. And the one thing we try to instill on the students is that design's not really a narrow industry. It's not just, I'm going to go off and be an architect, or I'm going to go off and be a landscape architect or an interior designer or a planner. There's just so many opportunities and nuances in the design world that you don't have to be the best at math. You don't have to be the best artist. You can just kind of be curious about stuff, and there's most likely a place for you in the design world. And so for us, the SEED program really wants to cast a really wide net. And I think Shamar did a great job of just talking through some of the opportunities, right? He said he went for what he thought was going to be, like an architecture internship. He learned about graphic design, and, you might learn about computer software programming or city planning. And we try and give a broader sense of all the opportunities out there so that as this first introduction to design, people can say, I see that there's some place in the design industry where my skills fit. And it's not, very tailored to one person's expectation of what the design industry is. So for us, that's really important of how we can understand what students are interested in and kind of steer them to, this is where you might, find a career that can support those interests and can keep you excited about your job when you're 10 or 15 or 20 years into your career. And I think that allows us to really bring in the breadth of what Sasaki does on a day-to-day basis and giving the students, really a long leash to go off and explore things. So we try and give them the umbrella view, and they can pick ideas that they're really interested in and maybe take a deeper dive into, with us as mentors, or, going off and finding other opportunities for themselves as well.
Shamar, do you want to add something?
I guess one little thing was at least a sort of connection between like the generations is that one thing that I remember from Sasaki is that we have sort of the principal interviews, which I believe is something that is probably very useful in terms of like how do you explicitly communicate between the different generations and the different sort of hierarchy of like any sort of firm or any sort of organization that you're in. And probably in a firm, like we will, let's say for an hour, just be meeting with one of the principals from in the architecture firm or the in the architecture department or the landscape department, and seeing like how their reflection of like how do they get into their job, and then how do they sort of view both the young people that they're going to be working with.
Yeah, it's a kind of a broad brush of trying to expose individuals to as many things as you can in a short amount of kind of time. It's a skill set that takes some real thought to organize. Another question for kind of the youth. So Ariana, Roxana, Jen, Carolina, Clady. I want to talk a little bit about kind of that hierarchy that we talk about. Shamar's talking with some of the leaders at the firm as a new person that's coming in at a junior level. How do the youth employees at your organization give their feedback and their ideas to adult or more senior employees at the organization? And how do you perceive that? Is it a comfortable, welcoming process? How does it work? How does it happen? Anyone have an interest in chiming in?
I could say something. For Green Roots, something that I really like is that they always support the youth's decisions. And if we ever need help in something, they'll always be like, yeah, and if you need our help, since we have different people who work on housing and health equity and food justice, we know that if we're working on something that has to do with food and garden, we go to a specific person, and we know that we can count on them, and we just ask them, and they'll always be like, yeah, and just really showing the support. And I think that's just really important in any youth organization, because it really motivates the youth themselves to doing what they're doing. And so yeah, that's just something that really has been working in our organization, and just the support behind our decisions.
Yeah, that's great to hear. That's excellent. Anyone else? Anyone from the NOAA team or any other teams that wants to kind of chime in on how you guys communicate? That's okay. Oh, no? Go ahead.
I would say another way is that a lot of times, our group is mainly around the same age, but we have Melinda, and she's our main form of communication, with adult, and she kind of treats us like peer to peer, we're the same as her, and she doesn't treat us any less. But since we mostly work with Melinda, I feel like it's always been easy for us.
Yeah. I would say I definitely feel like working with Melinda as she's our kind of director. It feels like going as a peer to peer. And there's kind of, if she has feedback, we'll have a conversation and we kind of just make it a point to just hear each other out first and kind of listen to what the other is saying before kind of reacting, or not just like listen to react, but like listen to understand her point of view. And she kind of does the same with us. So like if we have feedback for her, like we'll make it a point to sit down, we'll make a meeting, and it won't be so kind of serious or uptight, but it'll be more of a flow of a conversation and like, listen, like this is going on, and how can we improve like as a team instead of just like individual, and really making it us versus the problem, and not us like versus each other.
Yeah, that's a great approach, and that's a really healthy. It sounds like a really healthy culture, which is hard to develop. So credit to you all for kind of having this open, clear conversation without hesitation or ego. That's incredible at any level of any human communications. Let's jump a little bit. Again, I think a lot of people are thinking, how do we make these work? You guys are all established and have processes that work for you all, but I'm going to focus, Tati and Melinda, how can an organization interested in starting this kind of program decide on what they're going to work on in a season? So, are there principles that you're trying to meet when you create a project, in terms of, any drivers for that choice?
I'll start. Like I had mentioned before, I think I always start with the youth, what they want to learn, with what they want to do, with what they want to get involved in. I think it's not only futile, but like kind of disrespectful to like call ourselves a youth program here to help the youth and then like not honor and acknowledge what they actually want to study and learn. Just like kind of push our own agenda onto them. So that's definitely where I start. But I do my best, I think, on the back end to weave into that all of the other things that I've now, like as an adult who's gone through programs like this, know are helpful to have, like skills that I know are helpful to have. So like those skills around professionalism and those skills around how to have hard conversations about social justice, and just like, and like the skills on how to like do those hard things, not even necessarily the hard things themselves, but just like weaving those basic skills into like the lessons they already want to learn, the curriculum they already want to study. And I also often turn to students like Jen that have been on Green Team in the past and ask them what worked well or what didn't work well, what conversation styles worked well. And I think that heavily influences like the topic choices you can choose. If like typically working outside on the farm, it's noisy, everyone's like uncomfortable, hot, like I'm only going to have your attention for 15 minutes. What do I say, how do I say it, and what do I do to engage you in those 15 minutes so that you're still getting the lesson, still getting the point of everything that I have to give to you, but you're getting it in a way that's accessible to you. Yeah.
That's great.
I think for me, something that is, so I echo a lot of what Tati mentioned, but something that is extremely important, and I think keeps it very real, it's like keeping it human and like focus around our values, right? And in that way that you can talk about hard issues or issues in the community, whether it's environmental justice issues, social justice issues, climate resilience work, whatever it is. But when you talk about, how does this impact your family, bringing it back to that, and then also like, why does it matter? I think when it's centered around values and the similar values and things that matter to me or are important to young people, the organization as a whole, it's you have a same level playing field, I would say.
Yeah, it's interesting. You guys both kind of mentioned this sense of ownership, right? So you're fueling something that they're interested in and passionate about with a sense of ownership that they can make it theirs. And I think that's super important to that versus being handed an assignment that feels like an exercise that is potentially disposable at the end of the day, right? So that's a really, really thoughtful way to make sure that you're also driving your mission based on what the future needs and interests are going to be moving forward. So props to you both.
I think one of the youth from, I think Green Roots mentions it, and it's something that we do often. I would say surveys, like just to listen to what is going on in the community, what are the needs, you know, and things like that. That really drives our work. And that's a tool for us to like build relationships in the community, get our face out there, but also listen and make sure we're doing what the community needs.
Yeah, that's an excellent way to kind of keep a pulse on the ever-changing, piece of this movement. One more question, and then I think we're going to take a question from the chat after that, which is an excellent question from Isaac. So before we do, let's talk to Sarah. So how is the youth voice incorporated into programming and programming decisions? And how do you ensure that you have this youth agency that we've been talking about in the programming at your organization?
Thanks, Emily. Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on this, but I also, I want to, if it's okay, have Ariana and or Roxana respond to that first and their experiences of how we do that at Green Roots, and then I can just add something before we move on. But
yeah, that's great.
Yeah, thank you.
I can go first. So at Green Roots, one of the things that I really like is that the adults in the organization, they like always come to us with like projects that like they think we can work on or that they believe that we will like. And one of the things that's like really good about that is that we feel like the projects are never forced on us. Like it's always like up to us to decide whether or not we're interested in being involved in those projects. And I feel like as a group, ECO feels like comfortable saying no because like we don't want to like be involved in something that ultimately we're not going to enjoy. So we really like that, like we're able to have that ability to say no to certain projects and decide what we want to like put our focus on.
Yeah, that's great. Ariana, did you want to answer as well?
Yeah, it's similar to what Roxana said, in that and what I previously said is just like the organization itself, they really support us and they ask us like what we want or what we would be what we would enjoy doing, and that way we do have like that our voice is incorporated in some programming. Like for example, we have an Earth Day cleanup tomorrow, and we were asked to like give like a little speech or like a chant, like to get everyone motivated before we each set out to different locations. So just like things like that really, like I said, motivate us and encourage us to do even more.
Roxana. Yeah, so I'll just add a couple things. I think both Melinda and Tati mentioned having really open channels of communication and modeling and experiencing like that it's okay to give feedback, because it's really important to acknowledge the inherent power dynamics between adults and youth, right? And you know, it might take a couple of times, or it might take a couple examples of young folks it's experiencing that they can express themselves and not fear judgment or punishment or something like that, right? So having that and being able to flex that muscle of like, I can express what's important to me, and that's just okay, right? Because like in school and in life, as young folks, we're told like we need to sit down and be quiet and listen to the adults. So like even providing that space and really intentionally providing that space, and then backing it up with like, oh, you said you don't want to do this project, or you said you want to see this change. Like, okay, we're going to put our action behind our words, and we're going to make that happen. And like Ariana said, we ask ECO for their participation in Green Roots' events, and we also ask for their participation in the planning of the events. So this Earth Day cleanup that we have happening tomorrow, ECO identified the cleanup areas that they wanted to make sure we were hitting. So we involve them in our staff meetings, we involve them in our events, we involve them in on all of our like members meetings and staff outings. So it's important to make sure that young folks feel included in all levels of the organization, that it's okay for them to express themselves, and then that we're going to make change when change is being asked for. So I'll just, wanted to add that what they said.
Well, those are all really great thoughts. I'm trying to be conscious of everyone's time, but I do like this question from Isaac. So if anyone has a quick response, I'm going to read it out. How accessible and visible are the organizations to the local youth, and are projects local to their neighborhoods? Maybe just a really quick kind of around the clock. Everyone, yes, no. Let's start with Noah.
We try to be as accessible as possible, and in terms of being active in the community with some of our events, especially during the summertime. They can talk about like our pop-up events, if they sorting in our different, like our gardens or Con Street Urban Wilds, which y'all are gonna be at tomorrow, so we're really excited about that. And areas where young people hang out and stuff like that, and making sure that we're always in communication with other organizations that have youth so that we can collaborate and connect.
That's great, thank you. How about Green Roots? How are you guys accessible, visible? Are you local? Are you still here?
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, I'm relatively new to Green Roots, and I started about 10 months ago. So I want to say that I actually, I don't know if I can totally answer this question, but I will say we are involved with Chelsea Public Schools. So I go to different classes at CHS to talk about the work that we do. And I think there's two, this question about accessibility, like, does it mean that you have the understanding that this field exists, or does it mean that it's a field that you're able to actually enter and make a like a sustainable life for yourself with? And I think that that's something I think about a lot too, is like, well, we can get young folks into Green Roots and be organizers, but then when we think about the long term of, well, organizers don't get paid that much money, like in the long run. And so, and I think about that with arts programming that I was involved in the past too. Like, it's so amazing to have space for young folks to be artistically express themselves. But then when they want to be artists as a profession, like, that's actually maybe not that accessible of a profession to them if they have to support their families. So like thinking about the structures that, the much larger structures that impact our young people, I think is also a really important thing to be thinking about when working with youth. So how are we also pushing back in these industries to make these industries accessible to folks, more accessible to folks? Is Isaac, I'm not sure if that answers your question, but when you said accessible, that's what came to mind for me.
That's great. I want to be respectful of time. So anybody else really passionate about answering that question? Otherwise, I think we're up against our time together.
No, I think, Emily, just one thing, it's already been said, but to really, emphasize the point is the ability for these positions to be paid, really removes a financial burden that a lot of students have to face, and they can focus on learning, and they can focus on making these relationships and making these connections. For the Sasaki Foundation, that is not just paying a wage, but it's providing tea passes when needed. It's providing a lunch stipend. It's providing the technology that someone might need if they don't have a laptop or a computer to use. So, really removing some of those barriers that might be there, so that, it levels the playing field for a lot of the students coming in to be able to bring, their best self to the job every day.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's
Absolutely.
actually a perfect segue into, we're at our time, and Meredith, as a Sasaki Foundation board member, is going to say a quick goodbye.
Yeah, I just, I want to thank all of the absolutely incredible panelists that we had today to join us on Earth Day proper and share your expertise with us, as well as Emily. Great job moderating. So thank you very much. We really appreciate all of your depths of experience, and I hope the audience is kind of taking that away with them, with a lot of ideas of how to incorporate some of these principles into their own work. I want to remind, Jen mentioned at the beginning that there are some upcoming opportunities to engage with the Sasaki Foundation. So our design grants are open. They're open to community groups and interdisciplinary teams to propose their solutions to some of our community's most pressing needs. And those are due by noon on May 4th. If you would like to watch our design grants finalists pitch their ideas to a jury, you can join us at the evening on May 25th at Lamplighter at Cambridge Crossing. And our seed program is also open for summer applicants. So you can join there and take a look at what that paid internship is to learn about design. And those applications are due April 29th, which is a week from today. And I believe there are some links in the chat if you want to learn more about that. So thank you all so much for coming. And we really appreciate, all of the time that you've put in to share your ideas and your thoughts.